Have you ever wondered why some ideas spark revolutions while others simply fade away? It turns out there's a structured method to decode these cultural dynamics: culture mapping. In our rapidly evolving world, we face increasingly complex strategic challenges shaped by ambiguity and rapid change. Culture mapping offers a structured, human-centric framework to help us navigate this complexity by uncovering the underlying cultural patterns that influence societal shifts in decision-making. This approach allows us to better understand the full spectrum of social change, enabling more informed and impactful decisions. Culture mapping employs a semiotic grid structured around two axes to classify language and ideas. The horizontal axis contrasts analytic, language that is factual, structured, and logical, such as technical reports or data-driven explanations, with expressive, which emphasizes emotional depth, creativity, and personal perspectives. The vertical axis differentiates between static and progressive. Static language supports tradition, continuity, and social stability, whereas progressive language seeks to challenge existing norms, encourage innovation, and provoke meaningful change. Where these axes intersect, we get four quadrants. Each represents a different phase or state of cultural evolution. Disruptive is the first one. It's bold and, honestly, rebellious. This is where fresh, even radical ideas live. Then there's emergent, where those disruptive ideas start to influence behaviors and practices. It's like the experimental stage, where people start tinkering with these new ways of thinking. After that, you get to dominant. Ideas that work, that resonate, they gain social traction here and even become part of identity building for groups or movements. And finally, residual. Ideas in this phase, they've hit mainstream acceptance, so they're familiar, almost nostalgic, but often lose their bite or edge as they settle in. But okay, this probably feels abstract without some examples, right? Let's ground it in something real. Think back to Occupy Wall Street. That whole "we are the 99% slogan. It started as disruptive language in protests and the journalists that covered those actions. Then, as the movement grew, people began building on it, gathering in parks and testing its ideas. That's the emergent stage. Dominant. That came when it grabbed global attention, and social media turned it into a major narrative of economic inequality. Eventually, even brands co-opted it. A McDonald's Occupy meal, can you believe? By then, it was totally in the residual phase, mainstream and safe. Or take organic food. Its early ideas were disruptive. Healthy soil equals healthy people, that kind of messaging. Then it moved into emerging practices in farming and shopping. Grocery stores like Whole Foods made it dominant, trendy. Finally, when everything from chocolate bars to potato chips had organic labels, it became residual. A familiar but diluted concept, though every now and then, those early ideals resurface to challenge and start the cycle all over again. And this cultural cycle, it's not just a spontaneous process. It's deeply rooted in patterns we see in language and behavior over time. All right, so now that we have this cultural cycle framework in mind, let's add a new twist to it: generative AI. Think of it as this extraordinary tool that not only supercharges what we just talked about, but actually lets us explore culture at a depth and scale that was honestly impossible before. You see, Gen AI has this ability to process millions of pieces of language data, tweets, news articles, reviews, in real time. Here's how it works. Let's say we're trying to understand how an idea plant-based diets is gaining traction in society. Gen AI sifts through these conversations, identifying patterns in how people are talking about it, influences from sustainability, ethics, health trends, even personal stories, and then plots all of this within the cultural quadrants we discussed earlier. What emerges is essentially a live map of how this concept evolves, in the moment. It's almost like seeing culture breathe, sure. And then there's its predictive power, which is kind of a game changer. With simulation capabilities, Gen AI helps us play out what-if scenarios. Imagine asking, what happens if a major celebrity endorses plant-based eating? Does it spike into dominant language? Or does the narrative stall in emergent because of backlash or I don't know, logistical challenges in lifestyle adoption. It's like having a cultural crystal ball, but based on solid data, not guesswork. The impact of this in marketing, for instance, is huge. Think of brands trying to tap into youth activism. They can't just slap a slogan on a product and call it a day anymore. Gen AI helps them understand whether their messaging is aligned with disruptive energy, like rebellion and purpose-driven identities, or if it resonates more along the lines of dominant, a safer, wider appeal space. Done right, it's the difference between spearheading innovation and, well, being totally tone deaf. Policymaking is another incredible use case. Take urban planning, for example. Cities can use Gen AI to understand how conversations around public transit evolve, or what language appears when communities discuss affordable housing. This means decisions can be grounded in real-time cultural dynamics, not just historical data that might be honestly out of touch with current realities. So, essentially, Gen AI equips us with this almost intuitive ability to navigate complexity in culture. It's like having a cultural map that evolves alongside society itself. So, as we begin to wrap up, here's where things get a little messy, but honestly, also incredibly interesting. See, the biggest challenge with culture mapping, or any method that tries to decode human behavior, is how subjective it all is. Let's face it, interpreting language and actions, those messy, complex signals people send out, requires more than just a system. It takes this delicate balance between science and intuition, and that's why interdisciplinary work is so crucial here. You can't rely on data science alone to uncover cultural dynamics because, well, culture isn't just numbers or algorithms, right? It's also about storytelling, design, psychology, even history. It's this rich tapestry, and to map it effectively, you need minds from all these fields collaborating as one unified team. Each discipline brings its own lens. Data science might highlight emerging patterns, while social sciences ensure you're not overlooking the nuances of human behavior. And design? That's where everything starts to become tangible, applicable. It's fascinating how all of these pieces weave together. Now, when it comes to practical applications, this work gets even more inspiring. One area where culture mapping really shines is education. Picture this: universities developing better programs based on cultural language trends. By analyzing course catalog language and aligning it with cultural quadrants, schools can identify imbalances, like if they're too heavy on the theory side, but light on practical application. Imagine what that could mean for designing curriculum that prepares students for a world that's, constantly evolving. Then there's activism. Addressing issues like climate change or women's rights often starts with understanding where the cultural energy lies. Are we seeing disruptive ideas forming, like the fight for gender equality, in its symbolic roots? Or have these ideas progressed into dominant narratives where more people are participating, but the messaging risks dilution? Culture mapping helps organizers stay focused, refining tactics to ensure authenticity and avoid losing the essence of their movements. And let's not forget environmental initiatives. Cultural narratives around sustainability, everything from carbon footprints to the rise of circular economies, thrive when they resonate deeply with societal values. This is where cultural mapping connects ideas with behaviors, paving the way for progressive shifts in how people approach environmental responsibility. Ultimately, culture mapping isn't just a theoretical exercise. It's this powerful tool for seeing the connections and opportunities that shape our shared future. Whether it's informing better policies, fostering meaningful activism, or revolutionizing education, the insights we gain aren't just about understanding culture, they're about working with it, evolving alongside it, and maybe steering it towards something better. And that's all for today. It's been such a great conversation unpacking these ideas, and I hope you're leaving with a ton of new insights, maybe even inspired to look at the world a little differently. Until next time, take care.